Welcome to the Dear Professor series, where college students who take courses online speak their minds. I am your host and e-learning strategist, Dr. Kelly Alston, who is honored to have a conversation with today's guest as she sheds light on her experiences as an online student. I've been teaching online since 2004 and made the tough decision to obtain my Ph.D. through an online program. So I've been both an online instructor and an online student. As a result, I know that there are some wonderful things happening with online programs, as well as some not so wonderful things going on. The purpose of this series is to help professors and students experience a more fulfilling online learning environment by allowing students to reveal their needs and their pet peeves. I hope that this information will support professors in making the necessary changes or adjustments in the design and delivery of their online courses, which should ultimately enhance student success and satisfaction with distance education. So if you're interested in hearing what students have to say about their lived experiences online, please hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that the latest episode will come straight to you. If you're listening via a podcast platform, please be sure to follow and rate the series so that your interest and opinion of the show are made known. Today, I am honored to have Ms. Teni Ogunsan as my guest. Teni, did I get that right?
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. Welcome to the Dear Professor series.
Thank you so much for having me.
How are you today?
I'm doing very well.
Well, guess what? We are about to walk into May on tomorrow of 2024. Can you believe that?
I honestly cannot. I feel like this year is going way too fast, but here we are.
Yes, very fast. Do you have anything special going on this spring?
Not particularly, but
Okay.
I am looking forward to a new season in my life. So this spring will be a lot of getting ready to move from where I am. And that is pretty exciting. So, yeah, that's really it.
Well, that's a lot. Moving, it takes a lot. And it's also exciting. Are you frightened in any way about the move, or are you just fully excited?
It is a mix of both. I am both excited and both terrified at the same time.
Okay.
But I am excited to move. I think it's just the stress of trying to get everything and leave and make sure everything is in order is always stressful. But the destination where I'm going to is exciting. So it's what gives me the motivation to do it.
Oh, good. Well, happy travels. And I'm sure you'll have a wonderful experience. Now, Teni, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes. So my current move actually kind of ties in a little bit with my story briefly. So I'm Teni. I am 24 years old. I graduated in 2021 from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, which is where I originally grew up in Maryland. I did a major in bioinformatics and I did a minor in computer science. And I'm currently located in Minnesota at Mayo Clinic, where I'm a research coordinator. But that journey is about to end very soon. And so the reason why I'm moving is that I'm actually starting a new journey going to medical school in Tennessee. So definitely a huge drop from the cold climate here in Minnesota to warm Tennessee. So that is a little bit about me and kind of what's going on in my life.
Oh, Teni, you are so interesting. I don't even know where I want to start. I have so much. So first of all, you are a STEM child, right? Yes. So go STEM. So what made you, well, how did you first know that you were interested in the sciences?
Yeah. So it was, I don't want to be cliche, but I would have to say it was because of the influence of my parents. So my mother is a physician and my dad is a software engineer. And I think a lot of people in my community also had pursued higher education in STEM fields. A lot of them were physicians or were doing other type of STEM fields. So I was kind of always surrounded by that. I think from a young age, I just had a really interesting fascination with just life and how the human body works. I think I remember one story my mom loves to tell is that when I was a lot younger, maybe around 6, 7 years old, my mom brought a model of like a naked walnut, I think it was, which I think had been alive, but it was coated in all the material and goo that they put things in. So naturally, and she brought it to my church and a lot of my Sunday school classmates. So naturally, a lot of the people were running away and they're like, ew, that's disgusting. But she vividly remembers that I kind of just went up to it, started touching it, and said, that's what we're made of. So
I would have been those kids that with the children that were going, oh.
Yeah. I think from there she noticed one of my first like fascinations. I'm like, wow, this girl may have a natural bend towards the sciences. And I remember I used to tell people that, when I grow up, I'm going to be the chief obstetrician, gynecologist in the hospital. And so I think that was a dream of mine. I mean, I always seen my mom be a doctor, and it sounded so cool hearing her talk about medical cases and telling all the stories of things she was seeing at work. But I think what made it more confirmed in terms of my passion was actually more recently within the COVID period. I think a lot of things were happening in our country that were bringing to light a lot of racial disparities, and I think health kind of became part of the limelight. And I think that's when I first started reading about the disparities that women of color face, especially in maternal health, and knowing that, I'm a woman of color and that it's almost like our fate was very concerning and scary to think about, that something such as childbirth that's supposed to be such a happy event could turn into something so disastrous and basically like a death sentence. And so it just made me more passionate to pursue, a healthcare field where I can make a real difference and be that kind of soundboard and advocate for all types of women, but also just deliver that compassionate care. So that's kind of my journey into the sciences.
Yeah, so I just want to thank you in advance for going to medical school and being, a representative for, women of color. I grew up in a city where I was able to see people of color in all aspects, my doctor, my dentist, my attorney, the librarian, and that's very rare. And I know when I went to college, it was difficult for me to find a gynecologist that looked like me, Yeah. So I just really want to thank you, because I've been hearing that there are some shortages in the medical field. Is that so?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think COVID kind of did a doozy on the landscape of the medical field, especially with a lot of physician burnout, and it was pretty intense.
Yeah. And
I think because of that, that's probably contributed to that.
Right.
And also, a lot of things happening in our country with decisions regarding affirmative action and everything is just kind of accumulating into affecting people who want to go into higher education. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I want to ask you too, before we get into the online course discussion, about being a research coordinator. It sounds so fascinating. So what did your role entail, and what kind of research was being conducted?
Oh my goodness. Thinking about that makes me want to cry sometimes.
Oh.
No, not in a bad way.
Oh, okay.
I think in a good way, because I know that journey is about to end very soon. So it's like emotional. But I think also there's just so much that goes into it. So when I think about it, it makes me a little stressed. But being a research coordinator here at Mayo Clinic, I'm more so handling a lot of clinical studies that my boss, who happens to be a cardiologist, is doing. And so one of our clinical studies is a very big network study. It is across the U.S. There are many different institutions that are involved in it. It's called the Electronic Medical Records and Genomics Network, also short for EMERGE. And basically, in a nutshell, what we're trying to do is offer free genetic testing to approximately 25,000 participants across the U.S. And we're trying to assess a patient's risk of developing disease. It does not tell them that they will. It just kind of gives them a course of action and see that they might be at risk for a certain disease given based on, surveys that they complete that get a sense of their family health history or basically their lifestyle. And they also have genetic testing. So we would do a blood draw, or sometimes for some of the kids that we recruit, they spit into a tube, and then we have our lab extract DNA from it and we send it. We're testing to see if there are any, mutations or different indicators that may put someone at risk for disease. And so because we're handling 25,000 participants across the U.S., at Mayo, we are taking on about 2,500 of them. It's a lot of work keeping track of all those people. And there's so many different steps trying to get people to consent, get people to do their surveys, helping them through different problems that happen, handling samples, scheduling for blood draws, and working with all the intricacies of handling DNA extraction from samples and then sending it over to all these labs to process, and all of the headache sometimes that comes with that. It's a lot of work, but I think it's been very rewarding, especially into the sphere I'm about to step into, because there's a lot of things going on. So I've definitely had to learn a little bit more about time management and how to handle different things going on. I'm not perfect at it, not by any means, but I think I've been able to be challenged and kind of grow in that way, which I never thought I could do. But the amount of things I've had to kind of learn on the spot and take on is pretty incredible. So I'm kind of proud of where I've come. The research also is very in line also with what I want to do, because in addition to doing medical school, I'm actually going to be pursuing my Ph.D. as well. So I'll be doing a dual degree. It's going to be a lot of years in school, but I think this is just setting me up for my future.
Well, Teni, you are ready for that PhD for sure. If you already have experience handling 25,000 participants, yes, they need to just skip you to the front of the line.
Not quite 25,000, but just 2,500.
All right, 2,500. That's right. I gave you too many. But yeah, so that is just so exciting. I hope that I can stay posted on what you accomplish. Yeah. Now let's talk about these online courses. What is your general experience with them?
Yeah. So most of my experience with online courses was within the context of COVID, because we were all forced to take online courses. And it was hard at first to adjust to that transition, especially coming from doing my first 2.5 to 3 years of college in person. And then, all of a sudden we had to be sent home due to the pandemic, and then we were forced to do online. So it was a bit of a transition going from seeing professors face to face to now having to interact with digital tools, which always comes with its own headache and connection issues. And it just makes it a little bit more, complicated to learn when you have other kind of distractions. But I think eventually, because the pandemic dragged on for a while, I started to learn how to have a defined schedule and what doing things asynchronously was like. I think it did feel overwhelming at first because, when you go in person, things are more self-paced and it's like you have to do it. So you're able to go in, get your studies done, and then, you go home. But with online, especially with things being done asynchronously, it's kind of like you do it on your own dime. And that freedom was a little bit frightening at first, because I felt like there were so many lectures and things that will be uploaded all at once, and having to go through all of them on my own time felt very daunting. Instead of having like the daily, okay, on this day we have this lecture. So it definitely was an adjustment. I also am a person that learns visually. And so videos are my best friend, but I think also seeing the body posture and gestures and expressions of a professor in person really does supplement the learning. But with online courses, you're not fully able to get that experience. But even with all of those factors, I would have to say that I appreciated the flexibility and being able to go back and rewatch lectures as well, since most things were just uploaded and you watched them on your own time. Yeah.
Well, Teni, you touched on something that we're gonna get into it a little bit later. And that is that those visual cues and all the things that are often missing from the face-to-face environment. But you brought up something that's really important, that some people don't think about when they say, I'm just going to get my degree online, or I'm going to take online classes. And that is the amount of discipline that they require. Would you say that your discipline was challenged or enhanced as a result of having to take online courses?
I would say it was challenged at first just because of that transition. It was hard having to manage all of my classes being done kind of on my own time. And I didn't have people around me to kind of force me out of, my shell. So I'm the sort of person where if I start studying, I may not stop until someone says, hey, you might want to take a break. But
exactly.
Well, because everything was like just me in my house with my parents who also have jobs, it's like, well, if everyone's working, then I guess I have to work. So it was challenged because it almost felt like everything was on my shoulders, even though it wasn't in terms of the courses. But I think, time just naturally forces you to adapt to certain things. So I think I just had to learn how to get used to it. I don't think I fully enjoyed it the whole time, but I think I just had to get used to the situation and learn to call it quits when my brain wasn't going to function at a certain point, and learn that balance.
Yes, and you brought up something else about the fact that you learn visually. And I too learned visually. And I found when I was doing my Ph.D. online, even though it was an instructional design and technology degree, it was lacking in that area in terms of using multimedia to meet my needs. I found that there was just a lot of text-driven instruction, reading a lot and not seeing as much, which was really surprising. How did your instructors meet your needs as a learner who wants to see things and not just read about them? Do they do a good job of that?
I think they tried with the resources they had.
Mm-hmm.
I felt for the most part, it was mostly video lectures with them, in the corner, talking over their slides and having images, which does help to see images. But I think for me, I had to supplement a little bit more by finding my own videos. So I think I'm the sort of person where, yes, images are great, but I have to see things dynamically moving. So like, especially with the human body, if I read something about like an artery and how blood is flowing, yes, I can kind of understand how that works, but to see the actual mechanism and to see things moving and changing shape more solidified. So I felt like they tried to supplement with videos, but I think, they were going off of a curriculum that was supposed to be in person, and they had probably had their established, lectures and their established resources. So I felt like I had to do a little bit more digging myself on my own time, which kind of adds more to my study time to be able to supplement and really understand in depth. But I think having online gave me a little bit more time to be able to do that in-depth study because I did not have the pressure of, I must go to this next class right now, or I'm going to catch up and do this club, in college. It was just being at home and studying all the time.
Yes, and we just want to give a shout out to all those professors who were thrown into that situation, and offer them a little grace in trying to to deal with transitioning abruptly in that manner. So, Tina, if you were to rate your experience with those online courses on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being outstanding and 1 being horrific, what rating would you give and why?
I think I would have to give it an 8. I think given the circumstances, especially with COVID, they did the best they could. And I have to applaud them, transitioning so abruptly and to a new format, and not having much time to get used to the new format, but trying to consolidate all of their lesson plans into that. And I think they tried their best to make it better for us. I felt like the exams were a little, maybe slightly more easier, or maybe that's just, I don't know, maybe that's just my thoughts. But I think I think they tried, with given the circumstances. And we were in the pandemic for what, a year and a half. So eventually I kind of got used to that system. So I would have to give it an 8. I think they did what they could, and we adapt. We're not as rigid as we think we are. Given the circumstances, we have to find a way to adjust. So
Yes. Well, I think an 8 is a good score. Bravo, bravo to your university. Now, let's talk about your needs as an online student. And when I'm talking about needs, those are things that you require because you find them to be essential or very important. So when you were taking your online courses, or let's just say if you were to take courses in the future as well, what do you need from the professor and the course, perhaps in the design of the course, to be successful?
I think my needs for learning and from a professor are, one, to be able to have multiple links where I can watch videos, and have other ways of learning differently. I think it's amazing and so beautiful to be able to watch instructors be able to tailor learning to different learning styles. So not just having, lectures, or not just having text to read, but being able to dig and find good videos or good resources or models or whatever type of interactive platform to give other students who need that type of learning to be able to succeed, I think is wonderful. So I think for me, I just need to be able to have different formats to be able to supplement my learning. I also am a people person, so I really need accessibility of a professor. I'm the sort of person that would probably annoy professors with lots of questions because I'm like, well, why does this have to work this way? And that's something you can't necessarily do in a lecture, but being able to go to office hours and have that face-to-face and be able to ask those deeper questions that you may not necessarily be able to ask during a lecture is really important to me. Even just being able to have a good relationship with your professor. They're human beings too. They're not just this abstract dictator-like person that's teaching you. So I just want to be able to get to know them as well and learn about their interests and see how they can help me and probing into that deeper topic.
Yes, so when you were watching those video lectures, that's what I wanted to ask you about that. When you were watching those video lectures, how did you attack or deal with having questions? Did you email? Did you set up, go to office hours? What did you do to make sure that your questions were answered?
Jordy? Yeah, I'm so sorry.
No, I was going to say, since you couldn't always, I'm sure if it's a video recording, then you can't raise your hand. And you said your classes were asynchronous, right? They weren't live. So yeah, how did you deal with that? Because I'm sure you have lots of questions in the medical field that need to be answered.
Oh, for sure. Well, I mean, I would have to stop you there. Not all questions, I realize, can be answered in the medical field. But
that's true. That's true.
That's here nor there.
Right.
But I think my professors did a good job of trying to have office hours. And so I remember for one of my biochemistry courses, The professor did have like a separate kind of course room. We would use the platform Blackboard to do our coursework and to kind of get updates for different things going on and have all the videos and lecture slides on. So she had like a separate room we could enter on a certain day of the week where she would just sit in that room and anyone who had questions could come in and talk. So it's more like a group discussion and just if anyone had any concerns or questions they could ask, which is helpful because you can then get to hear what other people are struggling with and see if you also feel the same way or if you can help that person and kind of get that understanding from the professor. So I did appreciate that. Granted, like you can only see the top of their face, so I couldn't really see the full body, which I don't know if they necessarily want us to see that. But I think having the office hours was really helpful for clarifying those questions, especially from different lectures. And she would always have her lectures available. So if we had a question, she could always go back and show us and then kind of re-explain, which I really, really appreciate, especially in a course like biochemistry, which is so complex.
Fantastic. Well, let's talk about your pet peeves.
Yeah.
Now, a pet peeve is a minor annoyance that an individual finds particularly irritating, and it's something that bothers you more than it bothers others. So when you were taking your online courses, what pet peeves did you have, Teni?
Nothing that you can't really control because they're all in different environments. But I think distractions from other people's audio, where like if we're supposed to be muted, but someone is not muted and you're hearing like a dog bark. I think at one point, I'm sorry, I laughed because it was a little bit awkward. I think at one point, someone had their significant other. And so in the background, we could hear them kind of talking and saying things that, you know, you would say to a couple, but in front of the entire class. And it's like, did you mean to say that? And even the professor basically called out and said, sounds like someone is doing this. So it's just a little bit awkward. And I think the distractions from the audio kind of take you away from your focus. So, but I think it's not always something we can control. Or when the professor like asks someone a question and there's just silence on the other end. I think it's so awkward and it does kind of waste time a little bit because you're just sitting there waiting and wondering, is this person going to respond? I think just those little things kind of eat up time and kind of take your focus away. But I think, you know, we were just trying not to die during COVID. So I think they did their best.
Okay, so did you have another pet peeve?
No, I think that's really it. I think just the audio issues or, you know, the low quality, which is not something you can really control. But I think those pet peeves are just like, oh man, just all the nuances that comes with using media is just annoying.
Yes, I have had instances where students had their mics on and didn't realize it and were saying very inappropriate things to people in their homes. It could be their children, and we were sitting there like, like you talk to your child like that, you know? Or people are playing music, or people have their cameras on and they are in Walmart during class. Just all kinds of things that happen as a result of that virtual environment. So I could definitely relate to that pet peeve, and it's probably one of mine as well. All right, so this is the section that I wanted us to talk about, and you kind of covered it. So we'll see how this goes. And one of the elements that we find missing in online instruction is that connection.
Yeah.
And that's the connection to the instructor, the connection to the classmates, which we often assume is easier to do in a face-to-face environment. But that's not always the case. And so the connection is a byproduct of students being psychologically and emotionally drawn to their learning environment and all that entails. And so in a traditional face-to-face classroom, you're able to see facial expressions, as you mentioned earlier, and posture, even attire, and those nonverbal cues, and you feel a vibe when you're in a face-to-face classroom, whether it's good or bad. So you can also pick up on some similarities and differences between you and your classmates and even your instructor, maybe some biases, all of that goes on in that physical environment. Can you think of a classroom situation or a classroom environment that you enjoyed more than any other in your schooling, Teni?
Pretty good question.
You can take your time and think.
I think one of my favorite classroom environments actually is not a STEM field. It was not a STEM class, funny enough. Whoa.
Oh, okay.
Why not?
Right.
It was actually when we were coming back. So it was in 2021, late 2021. It was my last semester of college. So I think that's probably why I also made it more enjoyable knowing I was about to exit.
Right.
But this experience was also asynchronous a little bit, in the sense that we had all like lectures or talks. Sorry, I should preface. It was a culture class, and it was called Introduction to Intercultural Communication.
Okay.
And it was asynchronous, but there was part of our there was an opportunity to go into the classroom and see the professor, and she would have a brief discussion of what we learned. So she would have like the main reading, which I kind of did. But then classroom was for the discussion. And I think what I enjoyed most about that is because it was an introduction to intercultural communication, there were a lot of different people in that classroom, and we were basically learning about cultures and kind of the different things and nuances and traditions that you have in different cultures, and being able to hear different people's perspectives on their culture and kind of their interaction with the world, I think was really fun. I love traveling.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to hear about people's experiences outside of the U.S. was pretty cool. And I think towards the end of the course, we had a small assignment to do a presentation on not dangerous, well, it could be sometimes dangerous, but interesting and unusual things that people in certain cultures do that may not be as familiar, to us as American citizens or Western people. And I think it was really cool to watch people come up with talk about different traditions. And I think that was honestly one of my favorite, just being able to interact, and being able, I think we were going to have an opportunity to dress up like our culture, but I don't know if you're able to quite get to that. But that was, I think, by far my most favorite classroom experience, just because it was something novel, and just hearing about different cultures I always love, and I always love people and all the different things.
Yeah, so it sounds like you had a flipped classroom experience, is what we call it, where you kind of do the studying part online by yourself, and then you come in and it's more of an active learning taking place when you get there. So she was it was intentional, sounds like, in making sure that you connected to the content, but also that you all connected to each other.
Yes.
Fantastic. So what about those classes that are completely asynchronous? How do you think instructors can help to create those connections with the students individually, and also to create a learning community where the students are interacting with each other in a positive way? Do you have any suggestions?
I do. And I think they're not suggestions that are necessarily novel. I kind of got a sense of it during my time doing online courses. I know in a lot of different learning platforms like Blackboard or Canvas, especially when we had meeting rooms to do our classes, we were put into smaller breakout rooms where we would have to interact with a subgroup of the larger class to do assignments, discuss things. And I think that was their attempt at trying to get us to kind of have that smaller, more intimate connections with the students themselves, and hearing what they think, hearing their experiences or questions and being able to help each other. And I think from those type of groups that we created, a lot of times we would internally amongst ourselves create our own study groups for classes. So out of being, I guess, forced into a group, we found people to study with and would contact them. I always keep on going back to the biochemistry class because it was a pretty large class. But I remember, we gave each other our numbers and it's like, okay, if you want to have a study group, let's meet this time. And we all got in Zoom and we were comparing notes. So I think that was their attempt to try to still foster that learning environment. Yes, it's hard because a lot of times people don't put on their videos so you can't see them. And it feels like you're just talking to a ghost because it's just a voice, but you can't see the face. But at least we still were able to interact with each other and try to help each other get through the course and, commiserate and cry together over our difficulties. So, yeah.
So I often hear in these interviews some bad things about group work, but you're saying that being forced into a group had a positive impact on you during that time?
Yeah. Well, sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say, well, fantastic. I like to hear that because I just see so much that students get from groups if they're done correctly. And especially in the distance education space where they, don't seem so distant after all because they get to connect with somebody else outside of just, viewing information from a computer and being isolated. Yeah. So I really promote and encourage people to promote group work. It's just that you have to do it the right way. So I'm glad to hear that you said you were forced into a group, but that it helped you to create study groups that were beneficial to you. So you feel like in order to create those connections, that group work is essential or not?
I would not say essential. I think it can be helpful. And I think it also depends on the nature of what you're doing.
Okay, right.
Because I've been in, group work doing I think in one of my group settings, I had to create with my group this research poster talking about a certain condition. We all had different things we were going to research. But you always run into that one person who doesn't do anything and then tries to act like they have been there all along. And
yes, the freeloaders.
There is that, which can be frustrating. But I think in the context I was talking about, it wasn't really doing something for a grade that we all needed to do to get done.
Right.
More so just, yes, we had some assignments we had to do together to get done. But everyone, it was also a higher level course. So, freshmen and sophomores, they don't really care. But once you become
right, that's true,
senior and a junior, especially in the STEM courses, especially if you're going to a professional field, you kind of care a little bit more about, understanding things. So I think being in that setting where people are already like-minded and they have the same sentiment of wanting to try to do well in class, it was easier to do things together and help each other. And I think it was mostly for the purpose of just studying, not really doing class assignments, but actually being able to study and help each other understand things that we weren't getting. I personally think is really essential and beneficial in certain settings. For me, I'm a collaborative learner. Mm-hmm. I love talking through things because it's when I talk through and I kind of wrestle with things that I'm thinking about out loud is when I can get confirmations or no, this is not the right way. So it can modify the way I'm thinking and I benefit a lot from that. But I think the context of what you're doing in a group setting is very important to, how good it will work out or how well it will work out.
Yes. I what you described to me sounds like a mastermind, which I love, where, you come together with other minds and sometimes things click for other people so easily, yes. And they can explain it to you and you're like, oh. So that's one of the benefits of being in a group too. Well, we've made it to the end, Teni, to the Dear Professor segment, where you get the opportunity to share your heart with a fellow professor that you have in mind. This is a professor that you've already had. And so I want you to imagine that there's an online bulletin board with sticky notes, virtual sticky notes, and students are leaving messages to their professors. So what is the note that you would leave one of your online college professors?
Yes. I think my message would be, dear professor, I admire and I applaud your efforts to maintain, ethics and fairness in classes, even with being online. However, one feedback I would have is to potentially have other ways to monitor that, so that students, to monitor whether students are cheating or not. And I think this might kind of lead into the next segment from why I chose this message. But I know different people have different situations. So noise and distractions in the home may appear as if people may be doing other things they necessarily shouldn't be doing when it comes to testing environments and classes. But I think awareness of someone watching closely may lead to increased anxiety levels, which could lead to suboptimal performance. However, I do acknowledge professors' creativity and efforts to try to create a fair and equitable environment for learning, while still upholding university policies, even with hard and unfortunate circumstances such as, the times you were in during COVID. That's my message.
Oh, I love that, how you were so thorough and you were kind, but you also created what we called a compliment sandwich, where you gave that constructive criticism in the middle and as much praise as you could. So thank you, Teni. I'm sure that professor, who may not ever hear this, but if they did, would benefit from that, as well as those who are listening right now. So as we close, I'm going to share 2 takeaways that I got from this conversation as it relates to your needs. And primarily the first need was that you need diverse methods of addressing your learning preferences, and that you want a professor that is accessible and who's easy to contact, easy to reach, easy to communicate with, and also allows you to develop a relationship with them. And that's what I surmised from everything that you said. Would you say that was an accurate summary, or did I leave out anything?
Yeah, could not have said it better.
Okay. Well, thank you, Teni, so much for spending time with me today. Talking to you was indeed a treat. I think, are you my first STEM person? I think you are. Yes, right. And I appreciate your willingness to share. And I hope that our conversation blesses the students and professors who are under the sound of our voices. I wish you well in that move to Tennessee and in all your endeavors. I can already tell that you're going to be a fabulous physician. And how excited is your mom about that?
Oh my goodness, they're so happy. So excited.
Well, so your mom and dad, but I know your mom's the one that's the physician, right?
Yes.
Can't get my words together. So has she given you any warnings or how does she talk to you about that field?
I mean, yes, I've gotten the warnings, but I still wanted to do it anyway.
Oh, okay.
But I think she's been very, very supportive, and I love her so much. And she's been it's really cool to see her, how she's carried me through this kind of entire journey of schooling and up until this point. And,
yeah,
it's been positive. And I know, she's just always encouraging. It's like, God will see you through, and,
yes.
I'm just excited.
And that he will. My dear listeners, thank you for joining us. Please remember to share this episode and this series with 3 people who might enjoy these conversations with students from all walks of life and all levels of education who've taken courses online. As always, I look forward to spending time with you next week on the Dear Professor series, where college students who take courses online speak their minds. Bye-bye.